Hey everyone, welcome to lecture 23, I think. We're getting close to the end, so thanks for sticking with me this far. I had a few questions in the Teams channel that I just wanted to address real quick. The one thing about converting these fixed layouts into fluid ones is that you don't necessarily you don't have to make the fixed layout. You don't have to code it up in CSS like this and then switch it over. This is just an example of how to do the conversions. A lot of the times when this is useful is when you get a mock-up from a designer and the widths and everything are set to pixels because they made it on Photoshop. And so knowing these conversions is a good way to get it to look similarly in the actual browser. But if I was just making a website, I'm more likely to just say that my sidebar is going to be 25% and maybe the main content is going to be 75%. So uh, these this formula is a lot better when you actually have a pixel value to work with. So you probably won't be using this all the time, but it's a good thing to know, especially if you're on a bigger team and you're working with designers who create stuff in Photoshop. So hopefully that clears up a few of your questions. I wanted to go over your in-class exercises real quick. So I'm going to try to do this in the browser here. I might do it in Dablet actually. So it says set up a new project to hold today's exercises. Well, I'll just do it in my editor. So first, I actually kind of have a project I can use here, so just drag this over. And then I'll make a new folder for lecture 22 exercises. And then I'll make an index. Okay, and then this is the body, but let me just make my oops. Then I'm going to fix up some of my formatting. Still looks wrong. I think that's better. Okay. And then it says add a style sheet with the following. Alright, so I'm going to make a new style sheet. Remember the convention for naming a style sheet is either style.css or styles. That usually says, like an index.html, it says like this is the main style sheet with your project. I saw a lot of ones in your projects that weren't following that convention. And then I have to add it over here. So you'll see me change how I point to these style sheets sometimes. Often you'll see me do this. All this is doing is saying, look in the current directory. That's what that dot means. And then in that current directory, look for styles.css. So if I wanted to look back a directory, you can do two dots. If I wanted to go back two directories, you could do it like that. So if it's in the same directory, you don't have to put anything. So if you've seen me doing that, that is why. Okay, let's jump back here. Download, copy and paste Eric Meyer's reset style sheet. So I actually have one in here already. Just gonna paste it in there. And then I'll add it over here. Remember, you gotta add it first, otherwise it'll just reset all the stuff that you've already made. There we go. Alright, so let's open this up, see what it looks like. Cool. Open up my console so I can change the screen size. Yeah, so it's really fixed. When I make the browser too small, it covers it up, and that's not what we want. Alright, so let's jump back to our code and start identifying some pixels. So if we look at this CSS, we have a width here on the container, we have a width on the main, and we have a width on the aside. So we can start converting these. So if I go and look at my index for a second, my main container for the whole page is this one, this div with the class of container. So since it's the parent one that we're going to be working with, I'm going to set a width on this one to my percentage, and then everything else I'm going to base off of that. So if I want this to be a flexible layout but still kind of want it to look like this, I might make a guess on the percentage of the browser width that this is taking up. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we'll just try it at like 80% just to see how it looks. So I'm going back to my styles here. Wrong styles. Back to my styles. And I'm going to change this. Instead of 960, I'm going to do 80%. See what that looks like. Then I can switch back here. So it's a little bit bigger, but it's close. Here, I'll do 75. Okay. Alright, so now I want to go and work on my main and my aside. Let's see what the actual lecture says. It says some percent of the browser window, and then use the formula to convert main column into a proportional percentage. So if you remember, our formula is target equals divided by context equals result. So if our target here is 600, and now we need to figure out what our context is, and our context in this case is the container of main. So if I'm looking here, this is taking up half of its parent. This is some horrible formatting. 1 second. There. Is that better? How did I mess this up so much? There we go. Okay. So this is taking up we want it to take up a percentage of this container here. So our context is this parent container. So that one was originally 980. So even though it's a percentage now, we're still trying to think in proportions to what it was. And so it originally was 980, and since this one was originally 600 pixels, doing this formula will give us a percentage. So let's get a calculator. 600 divided by 980. That's a pretty big number. And then if you multiply it by 100, it'll give you a percentage there. And then I want to do the same thing with the aside, because again, the aside is taking up part of this container here. And target would be 360. So the percentage was originally 960 here, so I'll put that in. Okay, so even though that this is now a percentage, we're still trying to make these have their widths based on their proportion on the original mockup or in the original pixel value. So I'm still gonna have this context set to 960. And so if I bring up a calculator, we do 600 divided by 960, 62.5%. Okay. And then we want to do the same thing with the aside, since it's also under here and we're trying to format it, or we're trying to proportionally change it under its container. So 360 divided by, again, we'll do 960. %37.5%. Okay, and I'm gonna save that. And I think we got rid of all the pixels. And in theory, when I go back to the lecture and refresh, alright, so now when I do this, completely flexible. So yeah, that's basically how you do it. I mean, it can get a little more complicated when you have images and other media in there, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to deal with that today.